September 2nd, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. I want to begin with these new talking points from the conservative movement, Republican Party, as it pertains to COVID-19. It is to the point now that because there was only a small subset of the number of people who have died of COVID-19 died without the existence of a comorbidity or a pre-existing condition. They are now saying that coronavirus isn't really that deadly, and that it is a shame that we're at the point where we are shutting things down when only, about 10,000 people died of COVID-19 without any pre-existing conditions, any comorbidities. I'm going to pull up a couple examples of people saying this. I'm also going to play a clip of Dr. Fauci debunking this. But I think it should just be said at the very beginning of our conversation. That young person in their 30s who had hypertension very well could have lived into their 90s with medication. But because they got COVID-19, they died. The disingenuousness of conservatives as it pertains to these lives goes beyond the absurdity of their disingenuousness. It goes into a level of sociopathy, a level of uncaring and unconcerned, a level of being a death cult that I think really should alarm us, because they are willing to sit by and watch hundreds of thousands, if not millions more, die with no regard to the fact that they could have lived a lot longer. And the way they justify it is say, oh, well, if they hadn't been sick, if they hadn't been obese, like most Americans are, if they hadn't had blood pressure, like many Americans have, if they didn't have diabetes, like probably all of their constituents have. Like, it's not as though all of these pre-existing conditions that exacerbate the effects of COVID-19 don't exist already in the conservative party, in the Republican Party, in the conservative movement. It's just that there's this one added thing to it that makes them very clear about the fact that all lives don't matter. Only some lives matter to these people. The added element is that the concentration of deaths is occurring in black communities, black and brown and indigenous communities. It's not hitting white communities as much because of the number of black people and brown people who are in these poor communities that must go to work because our government hasn't given any type of supplement. That are essential workers keeping the grocery stores open. There's a story of a young woman who died of COVID-19 and all she was getting to risk her life and to ultimately lose her life was $2 more on top of her minimum wage at a grocery store. And so because there's a concentration of deaths that are happening in black, brown, and indigenous communities, this helps them explain, it helps them engage in this disingenuousness. But I will talk about this a little bit more. Let me first play the clip of Dr. Anthony Fauci explaining. And I don't know why it's necessary, but it is necessary. It's necessary. Well, I guess I do know why it's necessary. It's necessary because Republicans are paid good money to obfuscate the situation, to give propaganda, to give voice to propaganda that helps keep Donald Trump in power. And the saddest thing about this is not just conservatives and white folks that are doing it. I first found out about this because some black folks on my timeline, Facebook timeline, shared it, and they're like, see, this is all a hoax. So it's not just white conservatives that are actively using this propaganda, knowing that it's going to get more people killed. It's the fact that so many people are falling for this bullshit. Take a listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Johns Hopkins said that the U.S. has 6 million COVID cases, over 183,000 deaths here in the United States. So can you explain why the president would retweet a theory that suggests only 9,000 people have died of COVID-19 here?
Well, you know, the CDC came out with a statement which really did reflect the reality that, in fact, if you look at the people who died of COVID disease, the point that the CDC was trying to make was that a certain percentage of them had nothing else but just COVID. That does not mean that someone who has hypertension or diabetes who dies of COVID didn't die of COVID-19. They did. So the numbers that you've been hearing, the 180,000 plus deaths, are real deaths from COVID-19. Let not be any confusion about that. It's not 9,000 deaths from COVID-19. It's 180 plus thousand deaths.
All right, so those are the facts, but that does not stop the propagandists from doing what they do. Dinesh D'Souza, who is one of the preeminent propagandists for the conservative movement here, this fascistic death cult of a conservative movement, this is what he said on Twitter. He said, quote, if it's true that fewer than 10,000 people have died from coronavirus alone and all the other reported deaths were comorbidities, it follows that this virus by itself is far less lethal than the flu, and we have been victimized by an unconscionable scam. So just really pretty much to hell with all the people who literally could have lived into their 90s, you know, with blood pressure medication. To hell with all the people who were morbidly obese or obese and could have lived with medication or losing some weight into their 90s. To hell with everybody basically in this country, because the majority of this country is overweight, stressed, hypertension, diabetes. We all have those basic comorbidities because it's a very lucrative market to feed us all of these processed foods that they feed us. I mean, it's very addictive, right? Right. Never mind the people who have compromised, you know, just they have compromised immune systems because they inherited it. They were born with it. Right. Just absolutely F you to all the people who would still be alive today if not for COVID-19. And if not for the ridiculous politicization of COVID-19 that's still happening, and still they want to open up the football games. They want to send people out to football games. They want to send people out to school, into these incubators, into these petri dishes that kids always bring home viruses. They want to do all these things that are going to get even more people killed. I swear on everything, when this thing is over, y'all pray for me to not catch a charge, because they are killing people. They are killing people. Their ignorance and their indifference and their politics, they are killing people. And if they had their way, they would get even more people killed. This is just as bad as the flu. 180,000 people are dead. And still they want to compare it to the flu. Why? Because it helps Donald Trump. That's all it is. It helps Donald Trump. It helps the conservative agenda. It helps them. It helps their narrative. That's it. There is literally no other reason for them to put so many people's lives at risk except for the fact that they feel it's going to hurt them in November. And so they would rather make this some type of fictitious scam, some type of pandemic, in order to cast enough doubt in the minds of people who aren't paying attention. People who are paying too much attention, in that they're paying attention to conspiracy theories, and they think that the vaccine from this is going to be laced with the mark of the beast. And so all of these ignorant type of suspicions that are verified, that are confirmed falsely by social media, by YouTube. You know, everybody wants to listen to somebody. They would rather listen to somebody on YouTube than to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's been doing this since 1984, who is the leading epidemiologist probably on the face of the planet. But they want to listen to somebody who got their PhD from a mail-in university, and or somebody who wants to confirm to their suspicion that there's something inside of the mask. Like they take out the mask and say, look at this this is a tracer. This is how they track you. And Republicans know that level of unfortunate thinking is the nicest way that I could put it, exists across the country, and it's easily played into. They know this because of how successful the QAnon movement is.
And they knew that all they have to do is continue to sow this doubt and this disinformation, this misinformation into the national conversation. And we could be where we are now, where people don't believe that this many people have died, that 180,000 people have died. A lot of these folks don't even believe that number is right. And now the rest of them are saying, oh, well, now who cares because they died of a comorbidity. They died really of diabetes. They really died of a heart attack because they had high blood pressure. Never mind the fact that every single one of those people who died would be alive right now if not for COVID-19. I've been trying to clean my show up a whole lot because I have a lot of people, a lot of children who listen to my show, and a lot of people from my church days. But I'm sorry. Absolutely fuck every single one of these sick, twisted shit. I mean, y'all pray for me. Because when they put people's lives at risk and they actually start getting people killed, that raises the ante for me. And this is not just politics. This is life or death.